Presidente Cocktail is a classic Cuban cocktail believed to have been created in the 1910s, or at least we think. There are a few possible creators for this drink, but it was most assuredly created and named after Cuban President Mario García Menocal. Now, some have claimed the drink to have been named after Gerardo Machado, who was a president from 1925 to 1933 in Cuba, but the drink was created in 1915 or earlier. The first known recipe is from the Manual del Cantinero by John B. Escalante in 1915. You can find the Manual del Cantinero in PDF form online, and the recipe for the Presidente cocktail is a little hard to make out. As I was trying to piece together the blurred out words and use my terrible Spanish, mainly Google Translate, I remembered, of course, to stop what I was doing and check in with David Wondrich, who just so happened to share the recipe in Imbibe and even in its original Spanish. According to Wondrich, as the drink's popularity spread through the United States, the use of dry vermouth was adapted because the recipe translated, or at least the one shared in the United States, called for French vermouth, but the first printed recipe calls for vermouth Chambery, a blanc vermouth that is not the dry vermouth or sweet red vermouths that we're used to. It's believed that it would have been Comoz Blanc Vermouth de Chambery, as that was the only blanc vermouth available at that time, and I've even seen some accounts that say it was the only vermouth in Cuba. But if we fast forward to 1929, in the Libro de Cocktail, we see two versions, one with blanc and one with dry vermouth. This bottle of Comoz is new, but the House of Comoz was established in 1856 and was the second to make a vermouth blanc after Dolin. The style of blanc vermouth is from the French Alps and sweeter than dry vermouth, but not as sweet as the red, with wormwood, cherry bark, vanilla, and botanical notes. This vermouth would have been somewhat available until the 1980s, but by the year 2000, Comoz is no longer in operation. Recently, Dolin began producing and bottling the original Comoz, which you can now find. But if it's not available to you locally and you want an authentic Presidente cocktail, you should have an easier time finding Dolin Blanc. The recipe for the Presidente cocktail also shows up in multiple Bar Florida cocktail manuals from 1934, 1935, and 1937 as the Presidente cocktail. These are the official bar guides of the La Florida or the El Floridita, and these were the bar books of Constantino Ribalaigua. Constante is still to this day regarded as one of the greatest bartenders to ever live. And in that 1937 book, there are just 3 cocktails that claim to have been original creations of Constante: the Daiquiri No. 4, El Pepin Rivero, and the Presidente cocktail. Constante had been behind the bar of the El Floridita at least as far back as 1914, so the timing here matches up. And while the recipe is shared multiple places elsewhere prior to the bar guides from the El Floridita, no one else claims credit for creating the cocktail, at least not anyone where the timing also matches up. Constante's version had equal parts rum to vermouth and no grenadine, while the version shared by Escalante had 2 parts vermouth to 1 part rum and added in that grenadine. This could be for a bunch of reasons, including just one cantinero making their own variation, or the drink could have evolved over time. And that would not be surprising. After all, the El Floridita took the daiquiri from a shaken drink to a blender slushy style drink. If you wanted to make the exact Presidente cocktail from 1915, it would look like this. And if you wanted to try your hand at Constante's version from the El Floridita that was shared in the 1930s, it would look like this. But today we'll take on a modern approach and follow the recipe found in Tropical Standard, and I'll be following it exactly ingredient for ingredient. But there are substitutes out there for these ingredients, like the Dolin Blanc for Comoz. For this one, you'll need a saline solution, orange bitters, grenadine, a dry curacao, scarlet ibis rum, Hamilton white stash, and Comoz. We're going to stir this one starting with 5 drops of a saline solution, 2 dashes of orange bitters, half a teaspoon of grenadine, 1 teaspoon of Pierre Ferrand dry curacao, half an ounce of scarlet ibis Trinidad rum, 1 ounce of Hamilton white stash rum, and 1.5 ounces of Comoz Blanc Vermouth de Chambery. express a lemon peel over the top, and garnish with a lemon twist. So there you go, the Presidente cocktail, or the El Presidente. All right, let's try it. I do a lot of drinks here that are like big, bold, over the top, but this is just subtle. It's very refined, classical cocktail style from the early 1900s. So you get a dryness here. It's not sweet, but there's enough sweetness here to balance everything out. And then you get that bitterness. There's a little bit of that bitterness coming from the Comoz and from your orange bitters. And since we're not using a Cuban style or even a light Puerto Rican rum, we're still not overwhelming, you know, the rest of the drink with some like big, powerful rums. But you're getting a little bit more depth here from your rums than if you were using those other light rums. I did a video a while back, and I'll put a link to it, where I blind taste tested 9 daiquiris, and the Hamilton White Stash was one of my favorites because it has that clean and crisp, bright flavor to it, but it's not something that gets totally washed out like other light rums, but it's also not funky. It doesn't have that flavor profile in it. So what you have here is an elegant, refined, modern take on the El Presidente, but nothing too out there. We're using some rums that would not have been available in the 1900s. And is it better than the El Presidentes from the 1915 or the 1930s? The only way to find out is for you to make both yourself. So that's it for this one. That's the Presidente cocktail, or the El Presidente. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like below. Consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to support this channel, please check out the Patreon page, and otherwise, see you on the next one.